Helicopter Landings 101 Guide for King of the Hill has been released. It's a good day. The sun is shining. Pilots are landing better than ever before. I think my job here is done. Just gonna sit back and relax. Dear God, no. No, it can't be. I thought I taught them everything they needed to know. Why have they forsaken me? I just see fire. Fire everywhere. So, it seems that the internet is still in need of some ArmA 3 flying lessons. We've covered the Pawnee Gunship in a separate video regarding target prioritization and evasive maneuvers. That video told you everything you need to know about the kinds of enemies you'll be up against as a Pawnee pilot in King of the Hill. It went over the kind of threats you can expect in the skies and how you can escape or neutralize them. However, this video will tell you everything you need to know about staying in the fight for as long as possible, utilizing tips specific to the King of the Hill game mode, how to use your ordnance properly and how to aim well, even with the new crosshair. I've been playing King of the Hill for easily 1,000+ hours, so hopefully you guys can hoover up some useful tips and tricks here and there. Let's get into our first section of this Pawnee tutorial, survivability. The ArmA 3 mantra, back when it was being hyped up before its release, was survive, adapt, win. This couldn't better sum up the AH-9 Pawnee Little Bird. It may be a small chopper with a limited armament and poor protection from enemy fire, but in the right hands it can wreak havoc. For example, back in the old days I used to play a lot of Wasteland on Stratis. Now Stratis is a tiny island in the grand scheme of ArmA maps, and people on Wasteland usually have AA launchers readily available because of the gun stores. Yet despite all of these threats, I whittled the limitations of the Pawnee down and finessed it into a relentless killing machine that brought me to the top of the leaderboards. Now don't get it twisted, ArmA isn't about showing off your KD ratio like it is in COD, it's about who survives the longest. Dyslexy, someone I consider to be a master of the Little Bird helicopter, abides by this survive, adapt, win mantra through and through in his milsim operation videos. He isn't flying nap of the earth unless absolutely necessary. He isn't showboating for prestige. The take home point being that when you watch how he flies, it is suited to his style of playing games. He is a conservative, precise and tactical player. He plays the long game and he waits to strike. He isn't too greedy on his strafes and he backs off when he feels like he's getting too cocky. Now compare this to my playstyle. Yes, I'm in King of the Hill and there is very little fear of death because of the ability to respawn infinitely, but my playstyle takes snippets from his and translates it into my own idiosyncratic, which means specific to me, style of playing the game. I am an aggressive player. I like to push, I like to maneuver into high risk areas and give a show of force to the enemy team. This is how I play in nearly every other game that I own, from Battlefield 3 to 4 to 1 to 5 and more. My aggressive playstyle translates into how I fly in the air in ArmA 3 as well. For a beginner, this might not be very helpful as being aggressive will usually end up in tears for the learning pilot, but since this is an advanced tutorial, I urge you to really think about how you play your games. Do you snipe from afar? Do you get up close and personal? What kinds of weapons do you favour? All of these traits will tell you something about the psychology of your playstyle. Find this and make the Pawnee an extension to your way of playing games. This might sound quite abstract, but it will honestly help you to hone in on the way that you apply what I call the HAL principle. Now, the HAL principle is something that I mentioned in my previous COF landings guide, and it's an acronym for knowing your helicopter, knowing your airspace, and knowing your limits. This means understanding the airframe in which you fly, knowing the airspace you are traveling around in, and the limits these restrictions impose on your flying. Let me put the HAL principle into the context of my playstyle in, say, Battlefield 4, since some of you guys might be FPS players. Okay, so I know my limits as a recon soldier because my primary weapon is something that I cannot fire in quick succession. It's a sniper rifle. I know my limits in the close quarters environment I'm playing in, since there will be other armed assault or support players with quick firing guns that will beat me if I go toe to toe with them. So, when I want to play aggressively as a recon, I have to play to my strengths. I have to use canted iron sights to scope in quickly. I have to use smokes to sneak behind the enemy. I have to use my secondary weapon a lot. I have to jump around, pop around cover, and surprise the enemy in new and interesting ways. I'm aware of my limits, and I'm still complementing my specific playstyle. Figure out how to apply your playstyle in the Pawnee, and you'll be unstoppable. Okay, so now we've discussed the Pawnee's limitations using the HAL principle and how you can survive in the air with these limitations by adopting your own specific playstyle in the air. We can talk about the strengths of the Pawnee Littlebird. For such a light helicopter, you actually have a really powerful array of weapons at your disposal. You might think, miniguns and rockets aren't that great. They're not exactly high-tech like the attack helicopter, movable turrets, or lock-on missiles. I want you to take that misconception and fling it out the window. The Pawnee can destroy, or at least neutralize, any of the vanilla ArmA 3 vehicles you'll be up against in King of the Hill. It just takes knowledge of how these weapons work and when to use them. Let's begin with the miniguns. These dual beauties fire 7.62 rounds in quick succession. They're basically like two high-powered DMRs on the side of your chopper. They can tear through enemy infantry in seconds, and they can even ricochet if you fire them into a closed-off space. These powerful rounds are capable of penetrating light vehicles and some buildings too. Let's say you're approaching a tower and the idiots in there have left the hatches open. Even if they're not standing directly by the window, the bullets you fire inside the tower will still ricochet around and kill them. In terms of your application of miniguns for COF games, you want to be using them really as a last resort to kill targets. Enemies can always pull tricks out of their sleeves when you use the miniguns first. If you miss on your first strafe, they'll all be alerted, and by the time you come back for your next strafe, the element of surprise is gone and they're either hiding or pulling out an AA rocket to blow your ass out of the sky. This problem can be overcome by becoming efficient. Use these kinds of quick barrel roll turns to flip back on your enemy like so, and become proficient at spotting the puffs of smoke, tracers, and muzzle flash from the enemy infi on the ground. The main point here is to use miniguns when your rockets run out, or if you're 100% confident that you're going to make the kill. For example, lining up on a sniper nest, they're not stirred up, they're not moving. I can do this purely with the miniguns. This strategy also applies to clumps of infantry, like landing helicopters. But of course, rockets are still your best friend. You could miss one guy who runs away from your miniguns, and you get shot down, and before you know it, he's revived all of his teammates and unwound all of the work you just did. Miniguns work pretty nicely on moving vehicles, blowing out their tyres and killing their passengers in the process with the ricochet effect. Another place to use miniguns is on the parachutists, but be careful not to become too tunnel visioned on these guys, as you are just asking to be shot down by anti-air. But also, since the parachutes can actually blow up your helicopter if you fly into them. I learnt that the hard way. Of course, miniguns are also your friend for Pawnee to Pawnee battles. If you're not confident about aiming, however, something we'll discuss later, rockets are a sure way to take out air opponents quickly. The main tactic with these fights though is to aim for the engine block, obviously, in which case you'll see a black puff of smoke. This means he's auto-rotating and you can dive down and finish the job. Failing that, aim for the right hand side of your opponent's cockpit if he's facing you, since this is where the pilot sits. And there's nothing better than seeing the chopper lose input and drop like a stone. Now, rockets. Rockets, rockets, rockets. How many fights these beauties can end in a flash if you know how to use them. Miniguns are long, drawn out, and sometimes unreliable. Rockets with a direct hit on infantry will nearly always kill them outright, and sometimes even with splash damage too. These work best obviously in small clumps of infantry that are bunched up together, but you do only have 24 and they fire in salvos of 2, meaning you fire once, you're down to 22, and 20, and 18, and so on. You can use them up really quickly if you're not conservative with your ammo. Yes, you have resupply pads, but staying in the fight means learning to ration out your ammo. The amounts of times I've gotten into a tunnel vision duel with an armed vehicle, end up spamming all my rockets away, and then seeing a transport helicopter come towards me. I've got no rockets. The miniguns don't deal enough damage in that amount of time, and so they've successfully power dropped loads of guys I could have killed if I saved my ammo and fought tactically. I'll put my pyramid of threats back on the screen again, but these kinds of red, orange and light orange threats nearly always warrant a careful but generous amount of your rockets because of the high risk that they pose to you. Any threats in the yellow section can be evaded or partly taken care of with miniguns. They don't really warrant rocket attacks. Now, it's a given, when you strike air vehicles with rockets, it's almost always instant death. However, for tanks, AA and other ground vehicles, it can be difficult to finish the job even with all 24 of your rockets. As a general rule of thumb, try to immobilize the vehicle by shooting out the tires or tracks with miniguns, or to catch it unaware when it's turning and slow and vulnerable. Fire at their rear, as this is usually where the engine block is located, or the turret of tanks, as this will stop him from aiming up at you, leading to funny situations like this. I never expect you to fire at moving armed vehicles, tanks or whatever it is, unless it poses an extreme risk to you. It's very inefficient and difficult to gauge where he's going, where to lead your shots, since the smoke caused by the rockets obscures your view so much, it's just a waste. I've put up a little chart of roughly how much rockets it takes to destroy most of the heavy vehicles in a stationary position you'll be up against in King of the Hill. So now you're starting to understand the kinds of limitations and versatilities of your weaponry available to you in the Pawnee. We can talk about how exactly you can aim with precision. Additionally, since aiming is about spotting, I'll also touch on points about reconnaissance too. Now, I've heard some people complain about the new painted on reticule since it isn't as reliable as the old default crosshairs. They are completely fixed to the vehicle model, whereas the previous crosshairs used to take into account the inertia of the movement of the helicopter. Honestly, they're not really that bad, and they aren't a far cry from the old ones. Firstly, spotting your targets. When I'm flying around different zones of the AO in King of the Hill, I do what's called a far and a close sweep with my vision. If I'm flying directly for the AO, I'm looking in my wider field of view for transport helicopters, as well as incoming vehicles on the road from the enemy spawn. This is a wide, non-focused sweep that is meant to be quick and in the heat of the moment. I'm flying very fast at all times when I'm around the AO because of how visible you are to the enemies on the ground. This means I can only give my brain enough time to process things that are immediately moving. If there's nothing in my wider field of view, I can narrow it down and do a closer sweep. This means zooming in a lot, using third person and my track IR or free look key to look around whilst I orbit the city at speed. I'm mainly looking for clumps of troops on the towers, straggler vehicles I may have missed, and the odd stray soldier running around. Throughout all of this though, I'm constantly backing off and searching the skies for more movement. It only takes 5 seconds for an enemy Pawnee to spot you first and get the upper hand, by which time you're rocketed to death and it's back to the respawn screen you go. When I'm flying around the AO, which is the most high risk but also high reward types of flying you'll do as a Pawnee pilot, I'm doing this same tactic but with much more aggressive zooming alongside diving in and out of tree lines. I'm looking for 2 top targets that are my biggest threat: enemy attack helicopters or Pawnees and anti-air tanks. I'm listening for Tigris cannon or missile release sounds, also for the little turret nubs on the hillsides around me, and I'm scouting the skies for Blackfoot and Kajman choppers, which are usually really far up and ripe for rocket attacks. Now we're going to break down some clips about what exactly I'm doing when it comes to aiming with my ordnance. In this first one, I'm escorting our Team Mohawk out of spawn since we've been getting bullied by one particular Pawnee pilot. I'm in third person to see more and I'm flicking glances around the Mohawk. I spot the Pawnee and because he's unaware and posing little threat to me, I can set myself up. This involves speeding up so I'm as close to him as possible, minimizing the chance of missing, and then leveling out so my crosshairs are right on him. Watch how I use the pedals at the lower speeds when I'm behind him to create a clean line of fire. I spray the miniguns once to line up my aim, and then a few well placed rockets to finish the job before he has the chance to evade. So in this clip, I'm seeing a laze on the ground, so I'm moving low level as it could be a spotted Tigris. The lower I am, the better chance I have of catching him with his pants down. If I fly too high, he'll see me coming miles off. Watch how I switch from third person to first person to a quick zoom. You need to be really proficient with your controls, as this is the difference between life and death more often than not. I've bound my thumb button on my Razor Death Adder to the third and first person toggle to make this much more seamless, but do what works for you. I spot the Tigris, but I'm bobbing and weaving, zooming at his turret. I'm too committed to back down, so I keep flying towards him. Luckily, a bomb destroys him, leaving the marshal to be taken care of. In this kind of situation though, you'd ideally want to approach from the rear of the vehicles for obvious reasons. I set up with a quick orbit, using my pitch up key to center my sights on him. I use my pedals to line it up again, and when I feel the helicopter fully locked onto him, I can release all of my rockets. As I fly towards him, I'm aiming lower and lower to counter for the motion of the helicopter. This is risky since you're dropping altitude whilst getting closer to your rocket's splash damage. Only perform this if you're really confident you can make the kill or you're in extreme danger. So here we have an example of the outer AO scouting I was talking about. I'm flying low and evasively, but I'm also scanning the skies for moving threats. I spot a Pawnee coming out of their spawn and I start to set up shop to shoot him down. I immediately speed up and enter first person for a clearer view. He's coming towards me, so he's a high threat and I need to try my rockets first. I miss, and after you've missed, you need to be instantly pitching back around to face him. We both face each other at the same time, and this is the bit I'm going to slow down. He's at low speed, I'm at low speed. We're both vulnerable, but it depends on who can fix their sights on their opponent first. I'm using pedals to level the helicopter out again, and then I aggressively mouse down with a spray of miniguns. This was a very lucky shot and it killed him instantly. It was actually an ideal scenario for me too, since really you want to be the lower down Pawnee in this kind of gunfight. This is because I'm blending in against the backdrop of the terrain, whereas he's sticking out like a sore thumb against the blue sky. In our third clip, I do a nice barrel roll, which really has no combat application, but still, it looks cool. Even when I'm showboating though, I keep looking around. Luckily, I spot an approaching Pawnee. He's really close and ready to rocket attack me. I flip around and keep him fixed in my vision. He misses because he wasn't anticipating me turning on him like I did. He gets cocky and he keeps firing, clipping me as we cross. Just because I've got no engine power though, doesn't mean I can't fight. I use my pedals to flip me around, and as my sights pan past him with my semi-broken tail rotor, I take advantage of firing off a few rockets. They connect just before I die too. Haha, gotcha. I'm leaving base in this clip and I spot an enemy Pawnee harassing our air. He's flying on an unusual path, so I can't really aim my rockets effectively. I use my miniguns instead, but these don't really cut it. As soon as he levels out, I take my opportunity and fire off a volley of rockets. Boom baby. Now, just as a final brush up, there are of course various maneuvers you'll be undertaking as a Pawnee pilot, but the main ones will be the following: circle strafing, pedal adjusting at low speed, usually tapping the pedal keys to bring your crosshairs onto targets, pitching up still-stop rocket attacks, usually used on hovering attack helicopters, and anything in between, which are high-speed attacks made on moving vehicles that take into account the speed you are going and the amount of lead you need to connect your shots. I hope you guys enjoyed this rather full-on, but hopefully very useful guide for Pawnees in King of the Hill. We've covered a lot of stuff, condensing my years of flying into under 20 minutes of video footage. I wish you guys a fantastic week. Take care everyone. Tommy out.